Hello and welcome to Liberty Nation TV with your host, Jeff Charles. So guns are still all the rage in the aftermath of two heartbreaking mass shootings that occurred in Texas and in New York. Congress is in the middle of hammering out legislation that would further restrict firearms. In the Senate, it appears the anti-gunners might just have enough Republican support to get something passed. So I have Liberty Nation's editor-at-large and resident gun expert, Jim Fight, with me to discuss the matter. Welcome to the program, Jim.
Thanks for having me, Jeff.
Good. And as usual, we're not going to tell Scott Cosenza, also with Liberty Nation, that I called you our resident gun expert. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So, I'm sure you've been hearing what I've been hearing. There's some new developments coming out of the Senate related to some potential gun legislation. Can you kind of bring us up to date on what's going on here?
Sure, Jeff. And I like that you put in there that little caveat that it's potential gun legislation. Because what we have right now is sort of a framework agreement. We don't have actual legislation. We have, I guess, more of an agreement on principles. And that's a bipartisan group of senators. I think it was 10 Democrats and Republicans. And so what they're looking at right now is trying to hammer out legislation on that will penalize straw purchases. That's, of course, where you have someone else buy a firearm for you if you can't buy it, sort of things. Also, they want to increase funding for and support for what they're calling at this point state crisis intervention orders, which is extreme risk prevention orders or protection orders, rather, or red flag laws, as most people call them. They're talking about closing the boyfriend loophole, which is just kind of clamping down on that list of prohibited persons if you've been convicted of domestic violence, whether you're married or not, or have kids with a person or not, just to protect the victims more. They're also talking about more school safety resources, increased funding and resources for mental health. They also want to really lock down on the definition of a federally licensed firearms dealer. That kind of, along with the stopping the straw purchases thing, is trying to prevent illegal gun sales. And then, of course, there's probably the biggest thing in this for most people is going to be what they're calling an enhanced review process for any gun buyer under the age of 21, which, so, the Democrats wanted to raise the age, the minimum age where you can buy what they call an assault weapon, to 21. And this sort of compromise principle is, well, we're not going to raise the minimum age to 21, but maybe let's look at an enhanced review process. And I think the latest on that, and again, we don't have actual legislation to look at, but I think the latest on that is they're looking at a 3 to 10 day review period for anyone under the age of 21, where they're going to do a little deeper than the standard background check and look at things like, a juvenile record, any sort of mental health record, that sort of thing.
Gotcha. So there's quite a few things involved here, and Senator Chris Murphy, Democrat from Connecticut, he's been working with Senator John Cornyn, a Republican from Texas, and they're basically leading up the negotiations for their respective sides. But Senator Chris Murphy, he tweeted a thread that laid out some of the provisions that you just went over. And again, this is not legislation yet. They have yet to draft the actual legislation, but he mentioned that it would also include, quote, the first ever federal law against gun trafficking and straw purchasing. Now, when I'm looking at that, I'm saying, okay, this might make it, I guess, more illegal to engage in gun trafficking and straw purchases. But was there anything here that you saw that is aimed at decreasing the proliferation of illegal firearms, since that accounts for most gun violence in America?
Right. You remember there was this fella, let's see, he was big in politics there for a little while, Herman Cain. Do you remher him?
Yeah.
He used to love to say, yeah, that's right. He used to love to say the devil's in the details. And, honestly, I had never heard that phrase until he said it, but it's wonderful. And I'm stealing it completely shamelessly. The devil's in the details. We don't know what this legislation is going to look like. So right now we're talking about just these sort of what they're considering virtuous principles that they all seem to agree on. And that's a starting point. I'm not knocking that. and saying, oh, they're not really doing anything. But are they really going to be able to stop? I mean, here's the thing. It's already illegal to knowingly sell a firearm to a felon. It's already illegal to buy a firearm if you are a felon. I would say knowingly, but presumably if you're a felon, you know it. Generally speaking, I mean, maybe that's not the case in all cases, but yeah, so this is already illegal. So what we're really going to have to look at is when legislation comes out, how are they redefining the, at what point you have to become a federally licensed dealer? How are they going to actually try to stop straw purchases? Is this some sort of a approach from a different angle, if you will, for universal background checks, or even to stop the private sale of firearms entirely? I don't know. I don't want to jump to the conclusion to go, oh, that's what this is. But I have a hard time thinking of anything else that would really clamp down on the illegal sale of firearms. It's already illegal. There's already not a requirement that you go through, a background check process or anything like that through an individual. So I'm not really sure how. I don't know. I'm baffled by it, to be honest. I'm not sure how they intend to make something that's already illegal and completely ignored more illegal and therefore more effective. I don't get that. So
yeah, I can see how you're baffled by that, because I was baffled too. I really don't get it. I mean, like I said, the vast majority of gun violence is committed using illegally obtained guns. I believe it's only about, right, according to a DOJ survey in 2019, only about 10% of people who were basically busted for a gun crime obtained their weapon legally. So are you seeing any way that this measure would save lives, or how does this work?
I don't really see this saving lives any more than, honestly, any other gun control measure we've had so far. But I'm in the camp, me personally, I'm in the camp that gun control laws don't save lives, because, the violence doesn't come from the barrel of a gun. It comes from the person pulling the trigger.
Yes.
I feel like this is more of a we need to be seen as being busy. We need to feel like we're doing something. And I see that in the language all over social media and from these senators. It's like, we have to do something. And it's like, no, you have to do the right thing. It doesn't necessarily, busy work isn't good work.
Yeah, I think you nailed it there. 'Cause, I mean, I have a name for this stuff. I call it feel-good legislation. This is legislation. Good. Yeah, this is legislation that makes you feel good, but doesn't actually do anything. So here's my question, because when I'm looking at it, it's hard for me to find, but was there anything in what they seem to have came up with that might be acceptable, that might be okay?
Depends on what perspective we're looking at for acceptable, right? So as far as what has a chance to pass through Congress, and again, it's going to, I hate to sound like a broken record here, but it's going to depend on the language. And a lot of the senators said that it's going to depend on the language. And also, I think it's going to depend on party politics. If I think that any one of those, like 8 or 9 topics that they discussed, if sponsored and co-sponsored by a bipartisan group on its own, stands some chance of clearing the Senate. Altogether, that now we're talking about, okay, look, the more words there are, the more chances to screw it up, where you're not going to get 10 Republicans on board. But also there may be some resistance from the Democrats, because they're going to say, hey, this isn't enough. This is half measures. You want an extended review for background checks for 18, 19, 20-year-olds. We don't want them to be able to buy the weapons at all. So there may be some resistance there, but I think if they're careful in their wording, there's a chance this could fly in the Senate. And then, of course, it just needs a simple majority in the House. As far as acceptable to pro-gun conservatives, I don't know. I think we're treading on that slippery slope thing here.
What's interesting, and I want your reaction to this, is that, for people like us, there might be some laws that we might be willing to accept, but at this point, it seems like the push is to disarm the populace. So even with measures that we might normally be okay with, it's like a lot of us just don't want, and a lot of people that I see just don't want to give on anything because they believe that it's just another step towards what these people actually want. I mean, does that, how do you see that?
Yeah, I kind of feel the same way. I've seen a lot of stuff on Twitter, especially where they're talking about, hey, look, this is, a lot of anti-gun people and Democrats in general are saying this isn't enough. This isn't enough. This isn't enough. And, then some people are coming in and saying, look, I know it isn't enough, but it's progress. It's a little step in the right direction. And if you keep that in mind from the other end of the perspective of the argument, you have to understand that's what this is. This is an attempt at normalizing gun control, of saying it's, if we give ground here, like, a lot of the anti-gun people say, hey, there's been a 30-year logjam on firearms legislation at the national level. A pro-gun person is going to say that's a good thing, not a bad thing.
Yeah.
So the problem with any of these actual gun control measures, and I'm not talking about the other parts of that bill, by the way, to kind of circle back to your previous question, the school security provisions, the mental health resources, those are things that could actually and probably would actually save lives, because we're taking our focus off of the inanimate object that can't make decisions and onto the people who do. But yeah, even some of the here's the thing, and I've seen a lot of arguments for why, let's take that extended review background check, for example, why that's not a bad thing. Okay. Well, I mean, why is it bad to be more careful? Well, the question you have to ask is, do you, as a 18, 19, 20-year-old person, have the, as our Declaration of Independence puts it, God-given and inalienable right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness? If the answer is yes, then you have to also have the right to defend that. Otherwise, it's just pretty words on paper. And that's what it comes down to. It comes down to, if being able to prohibit anyone from the right to defend themselves is okay, then yeah, that's perfectly fine. But the bigger question is it actually okay?
That's a good question to leave it with. I mean, and like you said, the legislation has not been drafted. So when that comes out, maybe we can do like Jen Psaki and we'll circle back on it and see what it looks like. Yeah. But until then, thanks for joining the program.
Thanks, Jeff. It's always a pleasure.
And remember, this show is proudly sponsored by LibertyNation.com, where you can access podcasts, breaking news and analysis, and a range of biting and brilliant shows to whet your appetite for freedom and your fondness for the great American Constitution. Just go to LibertyNation.com on your browser, or hit Rumble, YouTube, or check out our Liberty Nation News Roku channel. I'm Jeff Charles. Thank you so much for watching. This program is a production of LibertyNation.com, where truth is making a comeback.
We're doing it for real, really real. Liberty Nation.
And Jeff Charles, contributor for LibertyNation.com.
I think we're starting to make an impact. Liberty style, fight for freedom.
Maybe tracking polls sponsored by Liberty Nation for Thursday.
Mentioned by Dan Bongino, Rasmussen, Jordan Peterson, and
I
others.
can do it again if you want me to.
Cited in Mark Levin's American Marxism.
I think we're starting to make a really big impact. Get noticed. We're doing it. Rock on. I'm gone.